Has anyone ever explained to you just how many cancer cells are packed into a 1 centimeter tumor? It is a staggering 1 billion cancer cells. That is the number already present in the smallest lump you could possibly detect during a self exam in the shower. My team and I were deep into researching methods to starve cancers, like breast cancer, by cutting off their blood supply using pharmaceutical drugs. Then we introduced a simple extract into our experiments, and the results were explosive. We hit a grand slam. We have all heard the persistent rumor that soy and soy based foods are dangerous, especially for those concerned about breast cancer. But let's look at the hard science. In every single clinical study that has examined the relationship between soy consumption and breast cancer outcomes, the consistent finding is that eating soy is linked to lower mortality rates. And in every one of those studies, eating soy was associated with improved survival. Here is a stark reality: modern medicine does not possess a single drug that can effectively target and eliminate cancer stem cells. There is nothing in the conventional arsenal that does that. But guess what? Mother Nature, in her infinite wisdom, had already solved this problem long before we even knew it existed. It turns out that certain natural compounds can actually seek out and destroy breast cancer stem cells. Very early in my career as a researcher, a fundamental truth about cancer was discovered. Tumors, in their earliest form, are essentially harmless. Microscopic cancers form in our bodies all the time without us ever knowing it. They remain harmless until they cross a critical threshold, the moment they learn to hijack our body's own infrastructure and recruit a private blood supply. A tumor isn't born with blood vessels. A single mutated cell doesn't come equipped with a pipeline to nutrients. It will sit there, a tiny cluster of rogue cells, and grow to about the size of the tip of a ballpoint pen or a pencil point. At that minuscule size, it hits a wall. It can't expand any further because it has no direct line to oxygen or a steady stream of nutrients. And the danger escalates when cancer cells, like those in the breast, master the ability to hijack our circulatory system. They selfishly send out signals, coaxing our body's blood vessels to grow into the tumor mass, feeding it. Our research definitively showed that if you take a tumor and completely isolate it from any blood supply, it will remain dormant forever. It simply cannot grow. In our bodies, without that blood supply, a cancer can only reach 2 to 3 millimeters in diameter. Again, the size of a pencil tip. That's its absolute limit. At that stage, our immune system acts like police officers patrolling a quiet suburban neighborhood. They spot a suspicious character loitering on the corner, a potential drug dealer. The dealer doesn't even have to be actively selling anything, just being there looking out of place is enough. The immune system, in this analogy, swoops in, puts that cancer cell in a paddy wagon, and hauls it away, eliminating the threat. This is the elegant natural process of immune surveillance that constantly protects us. Many women, upon hearing a breast cancer diagnosis, will ask me, "Doctor, why did I get breast cancer?" I always try to give them an intelligent, compassionate answer that respects the emotional turmoil they are in. But later, when I walk away from that conversation, I find myself pondering a much deeper, more profound question: why don't we all get cancer far more often? The answer lies in that very system I just described. Our immune system is constantly on patrol, conducting surveillance. Every time it detects a microscopic cancer forming, it bags it and disposes of it. That is one powerful defense. The second is our body's innate ability to prevent tumors from establishing that life-giving blood supply. This process is called anti-angiogenesis, literally cutting off the tumor's supply lines. No blood vessels mean no oxygen and no nutrients, so the tumor remains trapped at that harmless, microscopic size. It can't grow. Then the immune system can easily sweep in and finish the job. It's an amazing, hardwired defense mechanism. Another critical layer of protection is our ability to repair DNA. Cancer is, at its core, a disease of mutated DNA. A normal cell's operating system gets corrupted by a mutation, causing it to go haywire. It's like a virus infecting your laptop. Strange things start happening that you can't control. When that happens to your computer, you run an antivirus program or reboot it. Your body has its own version of the Geek Squad. It has a hardwired defense system designed to fix DNA damage. It's like having an internal mutation repair crew that rushes in, fixes the broken code, and even puts up a shield to prevent further damage. This happens constantly, all without us ever knowing. And of course, we can't ignore the critical role of our gut microbiome. Everyone is talking about gut health these days, and for good reason. We host about 39 trillion healthy bacteria in our gut, and one of their primary jobs is to lower inflammation throughout the body. Cancer thrives on inflammation. Think of it like a summer barbecue. When fat drips from the food onto the hot coals, you get a massive flare up. That flare up is inflammation. The cancer is like the steak or ribeye cooking on the grill. Every time inflammation flares up, the cancer gets supercharged and loves to grow even more. So, the gut microbiome, by keeping inflammation in check, is a powerful hardwired system for lowering your risk of many cancers, including breast, ovarian, cervical, and uterine cancers. It all ties back to the immune system, that police force constantly on patrol. Now, let's talk about what happens when that defense system is breached and a cancer actually takes hold. Here's a statistic about breast cancer that most people are completely unaware of. We constantly tell women to be vigilant, to perform regular self exams in the shower to check for lumps. We emphasize that the earlier you find something, the better the chances of a cure and avoiding serious problems down the road. The smallest lump you can reliably feel with your fingers is about 1 centimeter in diameter. We consider that a small, early stage breast cancer, which is why self exams are so vital. But do you know how many cancer cells are crammed into that 1 centimeter lump you just found? It is 1 billion cancer cells. 1 billion. That's not the lone drug dealer on the corner that a single cop can handle. That's an entire criminal enterprise. That 1 centimeter tumor has already successfully recruited its own blood supply. As a cancer researcher in the lab, I can tell you with certainty that if we isolate a tumor from blood, it stays that size forever. The moment a blood vessel connects to it, it's like handing the cancer a scuba tank full of oxygen. Then, as the blood brings in nutrients, it's like handing it a never ending bag of junk food. Once fed, that cancer can explode in size, growing up to 16,000 times larger in just 2 weeks. It's an explosive, exponential growth. So, how do we get this under control? How do we stack the odds in our favor? If you can actively fortify your body's natural defenses, if you can turn the clock back on unhealthy processes, keep those blood vessels from ever reaching a developing tumor, and strengthen your immune system so the cops can wipe out more of the bad guys, you are going to be in a much better position than someone who does nothing and simply waits for disaster to strike. This brings me to a pivotal story from the history of cancer research. There was a young researcher named Ted Fotis. He had moved from Greece to Switzerland to work in a lab. As the junior guy, he was often given the least glamorous tasks and the leftovers from other projects. He was working in a hormone lab in the late 1970s and early 80s that had pioneered a method to detect estrogen in women's urine. One day, they gave Ted a crate full of old urine samples that no one else wanted. Their instruction was simple: here's your project. Go find something interesting. While analyzing the samples for estrogen, he kept noticing a strange, unfamiliar spike in his results, something no one in the lab had ever seen before. He physically cut that spike out of the chromatogram to analyze its composition. It turned out to be a natural compound from soy called genistein. The lab's reaction was essentially, so what? They were studying human estrogen, and this wasn't from the women. It had to have come from their diet. They challenged him: make it useful or don't bother us with it. So Ted studied genistein, which is a phytoestrogen or plant estrogen. This research, in fact, is one of the primary origins of the entire urban legend that soy is harmful. People heard phytoestrogen and irrationally focused on the estrogen part. Ted tested this soy compound in the systems they used for drug development. He wanted to see if it could starve cancer by preventing blood vessel growth. When he introduced the soy genistein into the lab setup, it was a eureka moment. Boom, it completely knocked out the blood vessels that a cancer like breast cancer would normally recruit to feed itself. It was a stunning discovery, and it led to a groundbreaking research publication that changed the entire field, including my own career. It was the first proof that a common food contained a natural substance that could cut off a cancer's blood supply. That discovery eventually led to my TED Talk and countless other studies. The very first food found to have this power was soy. So, how did the myth that soy is harmful for breast cancer patients become so widespread? It's a classic example of how misinformation spreads. I believe most health urban legends start with well intentioned people trying to connect dots with only partial information. Someone learned that some human breast cancers are estrogen sensitive, which is true. That same person then read somewhere that soybeans contain phytoestrogens. They latched onto the word estrogen, completely ignoring the phyto part, which means plant. With good intentions but flawed logic, they concluded, well, then you wouldn't want to put any kind of estrogen into a woman with breast cancer. And that's where the myth took off. Unfortunately, they were dead wrong. They weren't scientists and they didn't understand the data. This is a perfect example of why having partial knowledge is dangerous. It requires you to keep digging for more information, not just stop halfway and declare yourself an expert. Because when you actually look at the science, the truth is the complete opposite. If you were to compare the chemical structure of a phytoestrogen from soy and the chemical structure of human estrogen side by side, they look nothing alike. They are completely different molecules. And what scientists have since discovered is that this phytoestrogen from soy actually blocks the effects of the body's own more potent human estrogen. It acts as Mother Nature's version of tamoxifen. It blocks the growth of breast cancers and it starves them by cutting off their blood supply. When I started talking about this early in my career, people would say, "That's a nice theory, Dr. Lee, but I'm a woman and I'm not going to take that chance." So I always direct them to the real world evidence. Let's look at where the rubber meets the road, actual women in real clinical trials. One of the most famous is the Shanghai Women's Breast Cancer Study, which followed 5,000 women who were at the highest possible risk for breast cancer. Why were they at the highest risk? Because they had already been diagnosed with breast cancer. They were in a super high risk category. And here is what the study found: the women who consumed more soy had a significantly lower mortality rate. It was protective. We're talking about a roughly 30% reduction. Among those women who had their breast cancer surgically removed and successfully treated with chemotherapy, radiation, or hormonal therapy, women with no detectable cancer left, those who ate the most soy over a period of years had a 30% reduction in the chance of their breast cancer ever coming back. That's not a theory, that's improved survival. Now, a healthy skeptic might say, okay, that's just one study, even with 5,000 people. Has it been repeated? That's a great question. And the answer is yes, it has been repeated 14 times. Since that initial study, there have been 14 other clinical trials involving only women with breast cancer. And in every single one of those studies looking at soy intake and breast cancer outcomes, eating soy led to less mortality. And in every single one, eating soy led to greater survival. Let's move beyond soy and bust a few more myths, like the ones about nightshades and lectins being universally harmful. Let's talk about foods that actively help us: tree nuts, walnuts, pistachios, almonds, macadamia nuts, pine nuts. All have been shown to lower cancer risk. They can also help cut off a cancer's blood supply. The same goes for the brassica vegetable family. We're not just talking about regular broccoli, but also turnips and all their relatives. They contain compounds called sulforaphanes that cut off the blood supply, feeding tumors. And what about berries? Blueberries, raspberries, strawberries. Strawberries contain ellagic acid, a compound proven to cut off the blood supply to tumors. This isn't just folklore. This is based on research I did years ago with the National Cancer Institute. We were actively studying pharmaceutical drugs to cut off the blood supply to breast and other cancers. And when we threw a simple strawberry extract into our experiments, we hit a home run. Now, let be perfectly clear. These foods are not replacements for your doctor, your oncologist, or for standard medical therapies. They are powerful tools that you can use for yourself as part of your own health care. When you go to the doctor, you're getting sick care. That's how our system is structured. But when you leave the doctor's office and go home, that's when your health care begins. That's when you take charge of your own well being. Food is a fundamental part of that personal toolbox. Green tea is another powerful example. It cuts off the blood supply to breast cancer. And then there's matcha, a specific and potent form of green tea. When you steep a regular cup of green tea, the beneficial polyphenols and catechins float out of the leaves and into the hot water, and you sip that brew, getting those compounds into your body. They are very effective at cutting off a cancer's blood supply, but you don't get all of the catechins out of the leaves. It's like soaking a sponge in a bucket of water. Even after you empty the bucket, the sponge is still holding onto a lot of water. You have to squeeze it out to get the rest. No one squeezes every last drop of goodness out of their tea leaves. Matcha is different. It starts as the same green tea plant, but about 28 days before harvest, the farmers cover the plants with a shade. This stress causes the plant to produce significantly more polyphenols and catechins. So, just by shading it, matcha inherently has more of these beneficial compounds. Then at harvest, they handle the leaves very carefully. Instead of just drying them and selling them as loose leaf tea, they dry the whole leaf and then stone grind it into a fine, vibrant green powder. This means that when you make a cup of matcha, you are consuming the entire leaf. You get 100% of the polyphenols, all the catechins, and even the dietary fiber from the leaf itself. Nothing is left behind in a tea bag. It's all there in your cup. That's why a cup of matcha is so intensely, densely green that you can't see through it. You whisk it into a frothy suspension and drink the whole leaf. You get a much more potent dose of cancer starving compounds from matcha than from a cup of steeped green tea. But here's the most incredible part about matcha, based on research from scientists in England. They found that matcha can actually kill breast cancer stem cells. What is a cancer stem cell? We are all made from stem cells. When our father's sperm met our mother's egg, we were just a tiny ball of cells. Our stem cells are what allowed us to develop a face, ears, a heart, lungs, fingertips, and toenails. We were all literally formed from stem cells. After we were born, the remaining stem cells were stored away in our bodies to act as a repair and regeneration system for the rest of our lives. But cancers also develop their own version of stem cells. Within that 1 centimeter tumor, that billion cancer cell mass, there are cancer stem cells. These are the master cells that can renew themselves and are thought to be responsible for a cancer's ability to regrow after treatment. We don't have a single conventional medicine that can effectively treat cancer stem cells. There is nothing, I can tell you, as someone who has spent a career in therapeutic development, we have nothing that targets them. Guess what? Mother Nature beat us to the punch. Matcha can actually kill breast cancer stem cells. It's truly amazing. Now let's circle back to the gut microbiome. There are certain beneficial bacteria you can consume, either in food or as probiotics. One particularly fascinating one is called Lactobacillus reuteri. This bacterium lives in your gut and actually text messages your brain. This communication triggers the brain to release oxytocin. Oxytocin is often called the love hormone or the social hormone. It's the hormone released when a 1 minute old infant is placed on its mother's chest and begins to suckle, triggering the milk letdown. It's crucial for uterine contractions during childbirth, and it's essential for social bonding. Think about the feeling when you're at an airport or train station and you see a dear friend or relative you haven't seen in a long time come through the arrivals gate. You run up and give them a huge, heartfelt hug. That feeling of warmth and connection is your brain being flooded with oxytocin. It's also released during a deep, passionate kiss, not a quick peck on the cheek, and it floods the brain during orgasm. It's an incredibly important hormone for reproduction and for the deep connection between mother and baby. So, this gut bacterium, Lactobacillus reuteri, signals the brain to release this vital hormone. Studies have shown that in a lab setting, when animals that are prone to developing breast cancer are simply given Lactobacillus reuteri in their drinking water, just like giving water to a pet gerbil or hamster, it significantly reduces the size and incidence of breast tumors. Isn't that amazing? A happy gut with the right microbial partner can text the brain to release a social hormone that influences mood and can have profound physical effects like lowering inflammation and boosting immunity. Maybe that's how it helps the cops on the beat do their job better. Another fascinating thing about Lactobacillus reuteri is that it also lives in your mouth and fights the bacteria that cause cavities. So, where can you find it? It used to be common in old fashioned small batch yogurts made by local farms. Unfortunately, as yogurt production became industrialized, the probiotic quality and diversity often decreased. Lactobacillus reuteri can be found in some specific yogurts, but you have to look for it. You can also find it in real sourdough bread. Lactobacillus means milk bacteria, and it's named that because it produces lactic acid. Lactic acid is what gives sourdough its characteristic tang. For hundreds of years, bakers in places like France would take a pinch of starter material, which contained Lactobacillus reuteri, and mix it with yeast to make their dough. Before baking, they would pinch off a piece of that dough to save as the starter for the next batch. That means there are hundreds-year-old lineages of Lactobacillus reuteri that have been passed down through generations. If you're going to try this, make sure you're getting real sourdough, not the factory made stuff that just adds vinegar to fake the tangy flavor. You want the real lactic acid from the live bacteria. You might be surprised to learn that Lactobacillus reuteri is also a starter bacteria for authentic Italian Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. I'm not talking about the processed, factory made Parmesan that comes in a green can. I'm talking about the real expensive blocks from Italy. You don't need a lot of it, and you shouldn't eat a lot of cheese anyway because it's high in saturated fat and salt. But in moderation, it can be a probiotic food. So, yes, this powerful little bacterium is found in real sourdough and real Parmigiano Reggiano. And it gets even more impressive. I did some research on Lactobacillus reuteri and found that in lab studies on wound healing, animals that consumed it healed significantly faster. In fact, it doubled the rate of wound healing. So, from fighting cancer to healing wounds to boosting mood, the connection between our gut bacteria and our overall health is profound and undeniable.